You're postponing our wedding because I'm sick." Evelyn's voice cut through the ballroom silence like a blade. Andrew didn't even flinch. He smiled that polished, practiced smile she had once mistaken for love and adjusted his microphone. "I'm protecting the company, Evelyn. You'd understand if you weren't so emotional right now." 500 people watched her world collapse in real time. If this story already has your heart pounding, subscribe to our channel and follow every twist to the very end. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The charity gala had been Evelyn Carter's idea. She had insisted on hosting it at the Harrington Grand, the most prestigious ballroom in Boston, because Carter Health Innovations was not just a company to her. It was proof. Proof that a 24-year-old woman with a second-hand suit, a borrowed laptop, and a diagnosis that should have killed her could still build something that mattered. The gala raised money for rare disease research every year. It was the one night Evelyn allowed herself to feel proud of what she had survived. She had spent 3 weeks choosing her dress. Deep navy blue structured shoulders, elegant but not fragile. She needed to look like a woman who commanded rooms. Because that was what she was. That was what she had fought to become. Andrew had kissed her on the cheek before they arrived and told her she looked powerful. She had believed him. That was the first mistake. The evening moved the way these evenings always moved. Champagne flutes catching chandelier light. Board members congratulating each other on numbers Evelyn's team had actually produced. Journalists angling for quotes. Donors writing checks with one hand and reaching for shrimp cocktail with the other. Evelyn moved through all of it with practiced ease, shaking hands and saying the right things, and smiling until her face ached. Her VP of Operations, Diana Reyes, caught her arm near the dessert table around 9 o'clock. "You doing okay?" Diana asked, and the question carried more weight than it looked like. "I'm fine," Evelyn said. "I'm always fine." Diana gave her a look that said she didn't entirely believe that. But Diana had worked beside Evelyn for 11 years. She knew when to press and when to let things breathe. She squeezed Evelyn's arm once and let her go. Andrew found Evelyn near the east side of the ballroom at 9:45. He was already holding a microphone. "They're ready for us," he said. Evelyn assumed he meant the donor recognition segment. Every year the company's top contributors were acknowledged from the main stage. She had written the remarks herself. She knew exactly what was supposed to happen. She followed Andrew to the stage. She stood beside him at the podium. She smiled at the crowd. And then Andrew Whitmore took the microphone and said something that was not in any script she had ever written. "I want to thank everyone here tonight for their extraordinary generosity," he began, and his voice was smooth and warm and completely controlled. "Carter Health Innovations exists because of people who believe that healing is worth investing in, and I believe that with everything I have." Evelyn smiled. That part was fine. "But tonight," Andrew continued, "I also need to speak to something more personal. As many of you know, Evelyn and I announced our engagement 8 months ago." Scattered applause. A few warm smiles from people who knew them both. "It is with a great deal of care and thought," Andrew said, and his voice shifted just slightly softer. Concerned, the voice of a man carrying a difficult burden. "That I'm sharing with all of you that we've made the decision to postpone the wedding." The applause stopped. Every sound in the room dissolved. Evelyn felt the words land somewhere behind her sternum. She did not move. She could not move, because she did not understand what was happening. This was not something they had discussed. This was not something she had agreed to. This was not something she had even known was a possibility 20 minutes ago. "Evelyn's health," Andrew said carefully, "has presented some challenges that require our full attention. We want to be transparent with our investors and our community, because Carter Health Innovations has always stood for honesty. And honesty requires acknowledging that uncertainty exists." He looked at her then, right at her, and the expression on his face was perfect. Worried, loving, sacrificing. It was the best performance she had ever seen. "We ask for your patience and your continued support," he said, "for both the company and for Evelyn." The room erupted into something that was not quite applause and not quite silence, but some terrible mixture of both. Murmurs. The rustle of 500 people shifting uncomfortably. The particular sound of people trying to decide what expression to wear. Evelyn stood at that podium for exactly 4 seconds after Andrew stopped speaking. 4 seconds in which she understood everything. He had not been protecting her. He had been dismantling her. He had taken the one thing she had spent 15 years hiding: her health, her vulnerability, the chronic condition that had nearly killed her at 32, and that she managed with medication and discipline and sheer will, and he had dropped it into a room full of investors and journalists and board members like a grenade, and he had done it with a smile that said he loved her. She stepped back from the podium. She did not say a word. She walked off the stage. Diana was there, immediately appearing at her elbow with the efficiency of someone who had been watching and waiting and already knew something had gone wrong. "Evelyn." "I need air," Evelyn said. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. Later she would be proud of that. Right now she was just surprised she could speak at all. "Let me come with you." "No." She turned and looked at Diana and said it again, quieter. "No. I need to be alone." Diana understood. She always understood. She stepped back and let Evelyn walk toward the side exit, and Evelyn pushed through the door and into the Boston night and kept walking. It was raining. She had not brought a coat because she had not planned to be outside. Her navy blue dress soaked through within a block. Her heels made sharp sounds against the wet pavement. She turned left at the corner without knowing why, then right, then left again, and eventually she stopped knowing where she was going and just walked. Her phone was vibrating in her clutch with a frequency that told her the story was already spreading. Journalists, board members, investors who had been in that room and were now calling each other and calculating what Andrew's announcement meant for their shares. She did not look at it. She passed a pharmacy with its lights still on. A late-night laundromat where a man sat reading a paperback beside a spinning dryer. A parking garage with a hand-lettered sign that said, "Full." And then she passed a diner, small, warm-lit, the kind of place with laminated menus and coffee that had been brewing since noon, and through the rain-streaked window she could see that every table was occupied. Almost every table. She went inside because she needed to sit down. Her legs had started to shake somewhere on the second block, and she had not let herself notice until now. The host stand was empty. A young woman called out from behind the counter that she could seat herself anywhere she found space. Evelyn scanned the room and found the only available chair in the whole place. It was across from a man sitting alone. He was somewhere in his early 40s. Brown hair, some gray at the temples. A flannel shirt that had been washed so many times it had softened into something comfortable. He was staring at his coffee cup with the focused expression of someone who was thinking hard about something that had nothing to do with coffee. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from a long day. The kind that built up over months. The kind that a person wore quietly and did not talk about. Evelyn hesitated. Every instinct she had developed over 15 years of public life told her to wait for the host. Ask for a different arrangement, maintain the appropriate social distance that her position required. She was Evelyn Carter. She did not share tables with strangers. But Evelyn Carter was also soaking wet and shaking, and had just watched her fiancé use her illness as a press release. So she walked to the table. "Can I sit here?" she asked. The man looked up. He had calm eyes. Hazel maybe, or green, the diner lighting made it hard to tell. He looked at her for a moment without speaking, and she braced for recognition, for the slight widening of the eyes that meant he knew who she was for the performance that would follow. It didn't come. He simply reached over, picked up his jacket from the seat across from him, folded it over his own chair and said, "Go ahead." That was all. No photo request, no double take, no name recognition, just a man making room. Evelyn sat down. The server came almost immediately, and Evelyn ordered tea because it was the first word that came to her, and then she sat with her wet hair and her ruined dress and her phone still vibrating in her clutch. And for the first time that night, she felt like she could breathe. The man across from her did not stare. He went back to his coffee and his thoughts, and the silence between them was not awkward, but simply quiet, which was something Evelyn had not experienced in a very long time. She did not mean to speak. But it had been a long night. "Have you ever had someone take something private about you?" she said, and her voice came out lower than she expected, "and put it in front of a room full of people, not to help you, just to use it?" The man looked up. He didn't seem startled. He considered the question the way a person considers something that deserves a real answer. "Once," he said. "In a custody mediation. My daughter was 7. Evelyn absorbed that. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry too," he said, "for whatever happened to you tonight." He looked at her dress, soaked, clearly expensive, clearly wrong for rain, and at her ruined makeup, and then he didn't look anymore. He didn't make a point of pretending not to notice. He just looked away with a naturalness that told her he was not performing tact. He simply had it. "Michael Brooks," he said, and extended his hand. She shook it. "Evelyn." He nodded as if Evelyn were a complete and sufficient name, which nobody had treated it as in 15 years. Everyone wanted the second name. The brand. The company. The net worth that the second name carried. Michael just nodded and went back to his coffee. Evelyn's phone vibrated again. She finally pulled it out and looked at the screen, not because she wanted to, but because the habit was too deep to resist. 17 missed calls. 42 messages. The first headline she could see in her notification bar read, "Carter Health CEO's Mystery Illness. What Whitmore's announcement means for investors." She turned the phone face down on the table. "Bad news?" Michael asked. "Public spectacle," she said, "masquerading as bad news. Is there a difference?" She looked at him. "Tonight there isn't." The tea arrived. Evelyn wrapped both hands around the mug and felt the warmth move up her arms and tried to remember the last time she had sat somewhere this ordinary. A diner with vinyl seats and a laminated menu and a man who didn't know her name. It should have felt diminished. It felt like relief. "You don't have to tell me what happened," Michael said. "But you can if you want. I'll be here for another 20 minutes. My daughter's at a sleepover. No reason to go home to an empty house right now." Something about the way he said it simply without asking for anything back made Evelyn set down her mug. "My fiancé announced to 500 people tonight that we're postponing our wedding," she said. "Because of my health." She paused. "He didn't ask me first. He didn't warn me. He just decided that information was his to give." Michael was quiet for a moment. "He didn't give it because he was worried about you." "No," Evelyn said. "He gave it because it was useful to him." "Then he's not actually worried about you." "No," she said again. "I don't think he ever was." She had not said that out loud before. She had thought it somewhere in the back of her mind, in the cold, calculating part of her brain that had built a company by learning to read people clearly. She had thought it and then refused to think it because believing it meant accepting that she had been wrong about someone she had chosen to trust. And Evelyn Carter did not like being wrong. But she was wet and exhausted and sitting across from a stranger who had no stakes in whatever she'd decided to believe. So she said it. "He used my illness," she said, "as a liability disclosure." Michael set down his coffee cup. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Pity would have made her leave. It was something quieter than pity, something more like recognition. "People do that," he said. "They find the thing you've worked hardest to protect, and they hold it over you. Not because it's actually that dangerous, but because they know it's the thing you're most afraid of losing control of." Evelyn looked at him across the table. "Who did that to you?" she asked. "My ex-wife," he said, when she decided that being a mother was less interesting than she'd expected. She told the mediator I worked too many hours and wasn't emotionally stable. "I've been working in the same shop for 12 years. I've never raised my voice to anyone in my life." But she knew that stability and emotion were the two things I was most afraid of having questioned. So that's what she went after. "What happened?" "I got full custody." He said it without triumph, just fact. "My daughter is 14 now and she's the best person I know, so whatever it cost me, it was worth it." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "Her name is Lily," he said, and the way his voice changed when he said his daughter's name was the kind of thing that couldn't be manufactured or performed. It was just real. "You raised her alone?" "Since she was 9, he said. "Yeah, Is it? Evelyn paused, not sure she had the right to ask. Is it lonely? Michael thought about that with the same unhurried seriousness he seemed to give everything. Sometimes, he said. But loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing. I had to learn the difference. Evelyn had spent 15 years confusing exactly those two things. She ordered more tea. Michael ordered another coffee. The rain kept coming outside the window, and neither of them was in a hurry to go anywhere, and the conversation moved. The way conversations moved when two people had stopped performing for each other. She told him about the company. Not the headline version, not the investor version, but the real version. The version where she had started it because she almost died at 32 and discovered that the medical technology available to someone with her condition was inadequate. She had not become rich and then become a philanthropist. She had become sick and then become furious and then built something because fury in her experience was an excellent fuel. My condition is managed, she said. It has been for years. Andrew knows that. He knows the numbers. He knows my medical team. He knows there is no uncertainty. She stopped. He presented uncertainty because uncertainty serves him. How does it serve him? Michael asked. Because if the board believes I'm unpredictable, Evelyn said, and if he positions himself as the steady hand beside me, the concerned partner holding everything together, then he gains influence. Over the company. Over me. She set down her mug. He's been doing it for 2 years, and I didn't see it because I was too busy running the thing. You see it now, Michael said. Too late. It's not too late, he said. It's just expensive. She laughed. She had not expected to laugh tonight, and the sound surprised her. It surprised Michael too. He smiled. It was an uncomplicated smile, the kind that didn't want anything from her. The expensive part, she said, is that I trusted him, and I don't trust easily. That's not expensive, that's human. I'm not supposed to be human. I'm supposed to be... She stopped. A CEO, he said. Yes. CEOs are human. Not in my industry, they're not. Michael picked up his coffee cup and turned it in both hands, and she could see the calluses on his palms, the particular roughness that came from working with your hands. She had not been that close to hands that looked like that in a very long time. Everyone in her world had smooth hands and sharp watches, and the look of people who had never repaired anything themselves. Can I tell you something? He said. Yes, she said, and meant it. The thing that made your fiancé's move work tonight, Michael said, is that you gave him access to the truth, and he used it wrong. But the truth isn't the problem. He's the problem. Don't let what he did make you think the truth about yourself is dangerous. It's not. She looked at him. The truth about yourself, she said slowly, is that you have a health condition, and that it almost killed you, he said, and that you built something extraordinary anyway. Those are the facts. He dressed them up as weakness. That doesn't make them weak. It makes him dishonest. Evelyn did not know this man. She had known him for 40 minutes. He had not given her advice she hadn't asked for. He had not minimized what happened or told her everything would be fine. He had just said a true thing plainly without trying to make her feel better about it. She found that she trusted it completely. I should let you go home, she said. I have 15 more minutes, he said. She smiled. Then I'll take them. They sat for another 15 minutes in the warm, small diner while the rain tapered off outside, and Evelyn asked about the auto shop, and Michael told her about an old 1969 Camaro. Someone had brought in with a seized engine and a frame that had more history than the owner knew, and he talked about the car. The way some people talked about art, with the particular satisfaction of someone who understood that restoration was not about making things new, but about uncovering what was already there. She didn't tell him who she was. Not her full name. Not the company. Not the headline that was already blooming across every financial news feed in America. He didn't ask. When she finally stood to leave, she reached for her clutch. I've got the tea, Michael said. She started to argue. You can get it next time, he said. Simply, not flirtatiously. As if the possibility of a next time was a reasonable and neutral thing. Evelyn walked out of the diner and into the damp Boston night, and she stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing the washed, clean air. Her phone was still full of messages. Her fiancé had committed an unforgivable act in front of 500 witnesses. Her board was almost certainly convening emergency calls. Everything she had built was standing in a wind she had not predicted. But she was also standing very straight. She had come into that diner shaking. She walked out of it on steady ground. She did not know why. She did not know yet that the stranger who had made room for her at a small table in a rainy night diner had once done something far more consequential for her. That he had saved her life without knowing her name. That years ago when she was 32, and the diagnosis had come back with a number that made her doctors go quiet. An anonymous donor had provided a rare biological resource that her medical team said was nearly impossible to find. She had written letters to the hospital program. Letters thanking a stranger she would never meet. Letters that said, "Because of what you did, I got to try again. I got to build something. I don't know your name, but I think about you on the days I'm most afraid. You gave me the chance to be afraid and still move forward." She didn't know that those letters had been quietly held by a hospital program coordinator who had cried reading them. She didn't know that the man who received them had read them twice, folded them carefully, and kept them in the top drawer of his workbench. She didn't know that Michael Brooks had read her words on the hard days too. On the nights when raising a daughter alone felt impossible. On the mornings when the shop accounts were thin and the future was uncertain. He had read a stranger's letter that said, "You gave me the chance to be afraid and still move forward." And he had believed it applied to him too. She didn't know any of that. All she knew was that a man named Michael had listened to her for an hour in a diner and had not wanted a single thing from her. And that it was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in years. She walked to the corner and hailed a cab, and she did not look back at the diner. But she thought about it. All the way home she thought about it. The next morning, Evelyn Carter walked into Carter Health Innovations at 7:45 in a charcoal gray suit with her shoulders set and her badge clipped to her lapel, and she walked past every person who looked at her with those careful, calculating, "What do I do with this?" information eyes, and she said good morning to each of them in exactly the voice she always used. She got to her office, and she called Diana first. "Tell me what the board is thinking," she said. "They're worried," Diana said. "Not about your health, about Andrew's move. Half of them are furious with him. The other half are waiting to see which way it breaks." "Who's furious?" Diana listed 4 names. "Good," Evelyn said. "Set up individual calls with all 4 today. And get me everything Andrew has filed through the company in the last 6 months. Expense reports, communications, everything." "You think he's been building something?" "I know he has," Evelyn said. "I just need to see it clearly." "Evelyn." Diana's voice went quieter. "Are you okay?" Evelyn thought about a diner. A cup of tea. A man with calloused hands who had told her that truth wasn't the problem. "I'm not afraid of this," she said. "That's different from okay, but it's enough." She hung up and opened her laptop and began. Andrew appeared in her doorway at 8:30 with flowers and an expression that had been carefully calibrated to read as apologetic. She did not look up from her screen. "Evelyn." "Close the door," she said. He closed it. He set the flowers on her desk. She still didn't look up. "Last night was, I made a decision I should have discussed with you first, and I—" "Don't," she said. "I was trying to get ahead of—" "Andrew." She looked up. "Don't apologize for the strategy. Apologize for choosing it. Those are different things." He opened his mouth. "You told 500 people my medical history," she said. "You presented it as instability. You did it without my knowledge or consent. And you did it in a way that positions you as the stable, responsible party, and me as the liability." She held his eyes. "I'm not going to pretend I don't understand what that was." "It wasn't—" "It was," she said. "I know because I'm good at my job. And my job is understanding what people do and why." He sat down. He was still very handsome, still very controlled. She watched him shift gears in real time, moving from apology to negotiation with the smoothness of someone who did it often. "You need someone beside you right now," he said. "The board is watching. The investors are nervous. having a partner who is visibly supportive. You don't get to use me to demonstrate your value, she said. That's not a partnership. That's a transaction. Andrew looked at her for a long moment, and she saw it. Just for a second. Behind the handsome face and the practiced concern, she saw the calculation. I built this company, she said quietly. I will not let you dismantle it. He stood up. His expression had shifted again. Not quite cold, but no longer warm. You should think carefully, he said, about how this looks publicly. A CEO who has a health condition who drove away her fiancé. That's not a story investors want to hear. Then you don't know investors as well as you think, Evelyn said. They don't want a liability, but they respect someone who can manage one. She turned back to her screen. After a long pause, Andrew picked up the flowers and walked out. She did not watch him go. She pulled up the document Diana had already started compiling 2 years of Andrew's activity within the company, and she began to read. By noon she had found 3 things that should not have been there. By 2 o'clock she had called her general counsel. By 4 o'clock she had a meeting scheduled with the board members who were furious. And at 5:30, when Diana appeared in her doorway, with coffee and the particular expression of someone who had been holding their breath all day, Evelyn looked up. I think, Evelyn said, that we're going to be all right. He's not going down without a fight, Diana said. I know. Evelyn took the coffee. Neither am I. She worked until 7, and when she walked out of the building into the evening air, her mind circled back the way it had been doing all day in quiet moments to a small diner. A cup of tea she hadn't paid for. A man who had said it's not that the truth is dangerous, he's the problem. She had not gotten his number. She had not told him her full name. She did not know where his shop was. But she remembered his face, the calm of it, the steadiness. She had spent 15 years surrounded by people who needed something from her. Last night, for an hour, she had sat across from someone who needed nothing. She did not know yet how rare that was. She did not know yet that she would go looking for it. She walked to her car in the gathering dark, and the city moved around her, and somewhere across Boston, in a small house near a neighborhood auto shop, a man named Michael Brooks was making dinner for his daughter and telling her about a woman he had met in a diner, and his daughter had looked at him the way only 14-year-olds can look at their parents with absolute X-ray clarity and said, "You're going to see her again, aren't you?" Michael had paused with the spatula in his hand. "I don't know," he said. "Dad," Lily said. "You're smiling." He turned back to the stove so she couldn't see his face. But she was already right. Evelyn did not go back to the diner the next day. She told herself it was because she was busy. And she was busy. The morning after the gala, her inbox looked like a crime scene. Journalists, investors, board members, 3 separate attorneys. Her PR firm, who had sent a message at 2 in the morning that read, simply, "Call us before you talk to anyone." She had people to manage, and fires to contain, and a company to protect, and she did not have time to think about a man with calloused hands, and a cup of coffee, and the kind of steady voice that made complicated things sound survivable. She told herself that for 4 days. On the 5th day, she drove past the diner on her way back from a meeting she could have taken by phone. She did not stop, but she slowed down, and on the 7th day, she went back. She told Diana she had a personal errand. Diana, who had worked with Evelyn long enough to know when not to ask questions, simply nodded and rescheduled the 3 o'clock. The diner was quieter at lunchtime than it had been at night. Different energy. The same laminated menus, the same coffee smell, the same vinyl booths. But the particular anonymity that nighttime had offered was gone, replaced by ordinary afternoon light and a lunch crowd that was already thinning out. He was not there. She had not been sure he would be. She had not even told herself she was looking for him. But when she scanned the room and did not find him, she felt the specific disappointment of someone who had not admitted they were hoping. She sat at the same table anyway. She ordered tea. She sat for 20 minutes reading documents on her phone. She left. She did not come back the following day. But 2 days after that, her car turned toward that neighborhood again, with the quiet autonomy of something that had already decided. He was there. Same table. Different flannel shirt. Same coffee. Same expression, that look of a man working through something internal, not unhappy, just present with his own thoughts. He looked up when she sat down. For a half second, she thought he wouldn't recognize her. She had worn her hair differently. She was in work clothes. She looked like a CEO today, which she had not looked like the night they met. But Michael Brooks looked at her with the calm hazel eyes and said, "You came back." Not a question. Not surprised. Just an observation delivered without weight. "I was in the area," she said. He nodded as if that were completely believable. "How's the Camaro?" she asked. Something shifted in his face. A small warmth. "Engine's running. Frame's a different problem. Guy who owns it doesn't want to hear that it needs another 6 weeks. People never want to hear that something takes longer than they planned." "No," he said. "They always want it ready before it is." The server came. Evelyn ordered tea again. Michael was already halfway through his coffee. They sat in the particular ease of two people who had already had one real conversation and discovered it was safe. "Better week?" he asked. "Complicated week," she said. "Which is different." "How complicated?" She thought about what to share and what to hold back. It was a calculation she made automatically with everyone. What does this person need to know? What does sharing this cost me? What is the angle? She looked at Michael and thought, there is no angle here. "I started formally separating from my fiancé," she said. "And I found evidence that he had been maneuvering against the company for about 2 years, filing internal reports with language designed to make my decision-making look erratic, copying communications to board members who were sympathetic to him, building a paper trail." Michael was quiet for a moment. "He planned the gala move." "He planned it carefully," Evelyn said. "What he did that night wasn't impulsive. It was the final piece." "What does that mean for you?" "It means I've been sharing strategy with someone who is working against me," she said. "Which is its own kind of lesson." She said it evenly. But Michael heard something underneath the evenness. "That's not just a business problem," he said. "No," she admitted. "It's not." She had trusted Andrew. She had trusted him at the level that her particular brand of privacy allowed, which was not the way most people trusted, openly, instinctively, but the way she trusted, which was slowly and deliberately, and with the full weight of what trust cost her. She had opened a door that she had kept closed for years, and he had walked through it and used what he found. "I keep thinking," she said, "that I should have seen it earlier." "You probably saw things," Michael said. "You just didn't want them to mean what they meant." She looked at him. "That's not weakness," he said. "That's hope, which is different." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "You're very reasonable for a stranger." "We're less strange to each other than we were a week ago," he said. She smiled. "Fair." They talked for an hour. He told her about the shop, how he had started it at 28 with a bank loan, that he still occasionally had nightmares about, how his father had taught him the difference between fixing a car and understanding one. And how understanding something meant accepting that sometimes the damage ran deeper than the surface showed, and you had to decide if the thing was worth restoring. She did not miss the parallel. She was not sure he intended it. But the way he talked about his work had the quality of a person who thought carefully about what things meant beyond their immediate form. "Do you love it?" she asked. "The work?" "Yeah," he said. "Most days." He paused. "Some days it's just a job. But most days I'll find something in an engine that nobody else would have found, or an original part that's been painted over twice and forgotten, and I'll think this thing had a life. It still does. It just needs someone to remember that." Evelyn was quiet. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. That's exactly how I think about the company sometimes. Like something that had a life before I touched it, and will have one after. And my job is to remember what it is while I'm in it." Michael looked at her across the table with an expression she could not entirely read. Not romantic, not calculating. Something more like recognition. "What does the company do?" he asked. She told him. Simply not the investor version. The medical technology, the diagnostics, the work on rare conditions that larger companies had decided weren't profitable enough to pursue. She told him about the unit they had built specifically for patients with her own diagnosis, and about the research team that had recently found a way to reduce monitoring intervals by 40%, which for people managing the condition daily was not a small thing. He listened with genuine attention, not the performance of listening, the actual thing. "You built that because it happened to you," he said. "Yes. And now it helps other people." "That's the hope," she said. Michael nodded slowly. There was something in his expression that she could not identify, a kind of internal stillness that looked like a person holding something carefully. She did not know what it was. She did not know yet. They met again 4 days later. Then, 3 days after that. The pattern established itself without either of them naming it. Tuesday and Thursday lunches, sometimes a Saturday afternoon if her schedule allowed. The same table. The same server who had stopped asking if they needed menus. The same easy rhythm that had appeared from the very first night and had not required maintenance to sustain. Evelyn noticed that she did not perform for Michael. She noticed it the way you notice a sound has stopped. The constant low hum of calculation. What impression am I making? What does this person want? How do I manage this interaction? Went quiet when she sat down across from him. She had not realized how loud that hum had been until it stopped. "My daughter wants to meet you," Michael said one Thursday. Evelyn's tea was halfway to her mouth. She set it down. "She does. I've mentioned you," he said. "A few times apparently. She says anyone I mention more than once is worth investigating." "That's an intense quality in a 14-year-old. She's an intense person," he said. He said it with the particular pride of a parent who had watched their child become someone remarkable and was still slightly astonished by it. "She wants to be an environmental lawyer. She argued with her history teacher last month about the long-term economic effects of the Dust Bowl, and apparently the teacher ended up sending her a book recommendation afterward." Evelyn laughed. "She sounds terrifying." "She is," Michael said. "She's also the best thing I've ever done." Evelyn thought about that for a moment. The directness of it. No hesitation, no modesty performance. Just a man stating plainly that his daughter was the achievement that mattered most. "Okay," Evelyn said. "I'd like to meet her." She met Lily Brooks on a Saturday afternoon at the auto shop. She had not been sure what she expected. Some version of Michael, maybe. Quieter. Younger. Lily was nothing like what she expected. She was tall for 14 with her father's eyes and the particular energy of a person who thought faster than most people spoke. She had a book in her hand when Evelyn arrived, something dense and academic, not a sign chosen, and she set it down with the careful deliberateness of someone who was making a decision about you in real time. "You're Evelyn," she said. "I am," Evelyn said. Lily looked at her with the same directness her father had, but younger, and therefore less filtered. "Dad said you run a medical technology company." "I do." "And your fiancé tried to use your health against you publicly." Evelyn blinked. "Lily," Michael said from somewhere behind a car hood. "I'm just stating facts," Lily said. She looked back at Evelyn. "That was a garbage thing to do." "Yes," Evelyn said. "It was." Lily seemed satisfied. "What kind of medical technology?" Evelyn told her. And Lily asked questions that most adults in business meetings did not think to ask, about the gap in the market, about the research pipeline, about the regulatory process, about how you decided which conditions were worth pursuing when profitability was always the countervailing pressure. She asked them with a precision that made Evelyn forget for a moment that she was talking to a teenager. Michael appeared from behind the car, eventually wiping his hands on a cloth, watching his daughter cross-examine a billionaire CEO with a small private smile. "She's going to be formidable," Evelyn said to him quietly when Lily had gone inside for a drink. "She already is," Michael said. "You raised that." "She raised herself," he said. "I just kept the lights on and tried not to say anything too stupid." Evelyn looked at him. "Don't undersell that," she said. "Someone has to keep the lights on. That's not nothing." He looked back at her with something that moved across his face and then settled into the steadiness he always returned to. "No," he said. "It's not nothing." They were standing very close. Not deliberately, just the proximity of a shared space. close enough that she could see the particular lines around his eyes that came from squinting in workshops and from years of carrying something quietly. He stepped back first, not awkwardly, just naturally. She was almost certain she was disappointed. 3 days later, Evelyn sat in a board meeting and presented the documentation that Diana's team had compiled on Andrew's 2-year campaign of internal manipulation. She laid it out methodically. The language in his filed reports, the communications, the meeting requests he had made with sympathetic board members that he had not disclosed to her. The way the pattern viewed all at once made clear that the gala had not been an impulse, but a conclusion. The board was quiet for a long time afterward. Richard Holt, the longest-serving member and the one she trusted most, said, "Evelyn, this is damaging to him, but it also raises questions about your oversight." "I know," she said. "Your instinct is going to be to go to war immediately." "My instinct is to protect what I built," she said. "Which I will do, but I'm not going to torch the building to get him out of it." Richard looked at her for a long moment. "You've changed." She considered that. "I've clarified," she said. "There's a difference." The board voted to open a formal review of Andrew's conduct. They did not remove him immediately. That process would take weeks, possibly months, but the dynamic had shifted. He was under scrutiny now instead of her. The wind had turned. Andrew came to her office that evening. He was not soft this time. The apology performance was gone. "You went to the board," he said. "I presented evidence to the board," she said. "This is a mistake." His voice had hardened into something that had always been underneath the warmth she realized. "You think you can manage this alone. You can't. Your condition is real." "Evelyn, and eventually—" "Stop," she said. "Eventually, there will be a management question that the board will have to address whether you like it or not, and if you've alienated your only—" I said stop. She stood up. "You do not get to use my diagnosis as a threat in my own office. I will not have that conversation with you. Not now, not ever." He stared at her. "Get out," she said. He left. She sat back down and put her hands flat on her desk and breathed for 30 seconds. Then she called Michael. She had not planned to. She did not know when his number had become the one she reached for when things got hard. But it had quietly the way things became true without announcing themselves. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey," he said. The sound of his voice, just that single low syllable, did something to her chest. "He came to my office," she said. "Andrew. He tried to use my diagnosis as leverage again." "Are you okay?" "I told him to get out." She paused. "I'm okay. I needed to say it out loud to someone." "Good," Michael said. "You did the right thing. He's not going to stop." "No," Michael said. "People like that don't stop. They just change tactics." A brief pause. "But you're not the same person he started working against 2 years ago. I don't know who that person was, but I know who you are now. And I don't think he does." She was quiet for a moment. "How do you do that?" she said. "Do what? Say the exact thing." He laughed. It was a low, easy sound. "I don't know. Lily says I'm accidentally wise. She says I stumble into insight like someone walking into furniture in the dark." "She's not wrong," Evelyn said. "Please don't tell her that. She already has enough to work with." She laughed, and the laugh felt like something loosening in her chest, and she sat in her office after hanging up and thought about how the weight of a terrible day could change so completely based on a single voice at the other end of a phone. She did not let herself think too carefully about what that meant. She called Diana instead and went back to work. But a week later, when she found herself rearranging her Thursday schedule to protect the 2 o'clock hour in the diner, she made herself stop and look at what she was doing. She was protecting time with him. She had not protected time with anyone in years. Time was the most valuable resource she had. She managed it with surgical precision. She did not give it away. She gave it to Michael Brooks without thinking. She sat with that knowledge for a long moment, and then her phone rang Diana with a question about a contract, and she answered it and moved on. But the knowledge stayed. 2 Saturdays later, Michael invited her to the shop for an afternoon that had no purpose beyond existing. No meeting. No agenda. He was working on the Camaro. Lily was at a school debate tournament. And Evelyn showed up in jeans she had owned for years but rarely wore and stood at the edge of the workspace and watched him work. He talked while he worked. Not continuously. The way people talked when they were occupied in fragments following the thought rather than performing conversation. He told her about the previous owner of the Camaro, an old man in Worcester who had bought it new in 1969 and driven it until 1987, and then parked it in a barn because he couldn't afford the repairs and couldn't bear to sell it. His estate had passed it on. Michael said he felt a responsibility to get it right. Why? Evelyn asked. Because someone loved it, he said. That matters. You can see it in the way the interior was cared for. Even after years of sitting, the seats were covered. Someone had been taking care of what they could reach. She looked at the car. He loved something he couldn't fix, she said. Yeah. Michael set down a wrench. But he protected it anyway. She was quiet. What? He said. My father did that, she said. It came out before she could decide whether to say it. He got sick when I was 17. He couldn't work anymore. We didn't have much, but he kept a small garden in the backyard. He couldn't do much else, but he could do that. So he did it every day until he couldn't anymore. Michael wiped his hands and looked at her. Not with pity. With that attention, she had come to recognize the real kind, the kind that waited for the whole thought. He died when I was 19, she said. 2 weeks before I started college. I'm sorry, Michael said. He wanted me to go, she said. He kept saying, go and do something that would take everything you have. Don't save yourself for something smaller. She stopped. I think that's why I built the company the way I did. All in. Nothing held back. He sounds like someone who understood what things were worth. Yes, she said. He did. She looked at the car. So do you. The afternoon wound down slowly. Lily arrived home from her tournament and immediately reported that she had won both rounds and destroyed the opposing team's argument about water rights so completely that one of the judges had asked for her notes. Michael cooked dinner. It was a completely ordinary thing. Pasta, a jar of sauce garlic bread that had been under the broiler slightly too long, and they sat at the kitchen table, and Lily talked about the debate, and Michael asked questions, and Evelyn sat in the middle of the ordinary evening and felt something she had not felt in years. Like she was somewhere she was supposed to be. Like the performance had stopped, not just temporarily, but structurally, not because she had chosen to lower her guard, but because somehow in this house there was no wall to lower. It had just ceased to exist. She helped with the dishes. Michael washed. She dried. Lily disappeared to do homework and could be heard occasionally arguing with a textbook through the closed door. They were quiet. Not the quiet of people with nothing to say. The other kind. Thank you, Evelyn said, for pasta and slightly burned bread. For this, she said. All of it. She set down the last dish. I don't have many places where I don't have to be something specific. This is one of them. I don't know how it happened, but it did. Michael was quiet for a moment. You don't have to be anything specific here, he said. Just you. She looked at him. He was looking at her too, and this time neither of them stepped back. Michael, she said softly. I know, he said. She did not ask what he knew. She understood that he did. She drove home an hour later, in the particular days of a person who is trying to hold something new and fragile and enormous without knowing the right way to carry it. The board review was ongoing. Andrew was still in the building. Her company was still navigating the fallout of the gala night. None of that had disappeared, but something else had appeared alongside it. Something she had not expected and had not planned for and could not manage with strategy or infrastructure or a board presentation. She sat in her car in her parking garage for 4 minutes before going inside. She was not afraid of it. She had been afraid of things before. Medical diagnoses, bank loans with payment schedules that kept her awake at night. Investors who had looked at her like she was a risk they had not fully calculated, She had been afraid and moved forward anyway. This felt like that, except that moving forward meant moving towards something rather than through it. She got out of her car and went inside and sat at her desk and looked at her phone. She had one unread message from Diana, 3 from her legal team, and 1 from a number she had not yet saved but recognized immediately. Michael had sent it 14 minutes ago. It said, "Lily wants me to tell you that you won the debate on which is better, mechanical expertise or business strategy. She has ruled it a draw, which she says she has never given anyone before." Evelyn read it twice. Then she typed back, "Tell Lily I accept the draw and will be requesting a rematch." She set the phone down. She was smiling. She had not been smiling when she sat down. She pulled up the board report that needed reviewing and began to read. But her mind kept circling back to a kitchen table, to slightly burned garlic bread, to a man who had stood beside her at a sink and said, "You don't have to be anything specific here. Just you," with the quietest certainty she had ever heard. She had built a company on fury and survival, and the relentless refusal to accept the limits other people set for her. She had not built room for this. She had not known she needed it. She was starting to understand that she had needed it for a very long time. And somewhere in a quiet house across the city, Michael Brooks sat at the kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed, and he looked at the window and he thought about the way Evelyn had said thank you. Not the professional version, not the CEO version, the real one, small and undefended and completely genuine. He thought about a drawer in his workbench. He thought about letters he had kept for years, written by a woman who had thanked a stranger for giving her the chance to be afraid and still move forward. He thought about how she had sat in his kitchen tonight and looked like someone who was, for the first time in a long time, not afraid at all. He had suspected it from almost the beginning. The company, the diagnosis, the way she had talked about almost dying and building something in response. He had not said anything. He had not said anything because the moment he said it, the equation would change. She would see him differently. She would feel something she had not chosen to feel: obligation or gratitude, or the complicated thing that happened when you discovered a stranger had been part of your life without your knowledge. And he did not want her to choose him because of what he had given her 7 years ago. He wanted her to choose him because of who he was now. He opened the drawer of the kitchen cabinet where he kept things he was not ready to put away but did not need every day. He found the envelope he had kept so long, the edges had gone soft. Inside were 3 letters printed on paper that had once been medical facility white and had softened to the color of old ivory. He did not read them. He did not need to. He knew every word. He put the envelope back and closed the drawer and told himself it did not matter. But it mattered. And somewhere in the back of his quiet, careful heart, Michael Brooks knew that a secret, even a kind one, always found its way out eventually. He just hoped when it did that she would understand why he had kept it. The board review took 6 weeks. 6 weeks during which Andrew Whitmore showed up to work every single morning in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, smiled at everyone he passed in the hallway, and behaved with the precise, controlled composure of a man who believed he was going to win. Evelyn watched him do it and felt something clarify inside her, the way water clarifies when you stop stirring it. The fury she had felt the night of the gala had burned down to something colder and more useful. Not anger anymore, or certainty. She knew what he was, and she was done pretending otherwise. The formal review board met on a Tuesday morning in the conference room on the 14th floor. Evelyn sat on one side of the table. Andrew sat on the other. The board members arranged themselves between them like people who understood they were witnessing something that would define what happened next. Richard Holt presided. He was 71 years old and had been in boardrooms for 40 years and had the particular quality of someone who had seen every variation of human behavior that power and money could produce. He did not take sides. He followed evidence. The evidence was not kind to Andrew. 2 years of documentation. Internal reports with language so carefully calibrated that each sentence could be read 2 ways, as concern or as sabotage, depending on what you knew about the person writing them. Communications copy to board members who had subsequently raised questions about Evelyn's management capacity. A formal memo. Andrew had submitted 8 months ago, suggesting the board consider establishing a health and continuity protocol for leadership positions, filed 3 weeks after Evelyn had disclosed her diagnosis to him in private. 3 weeks after she had trusted him. Richard read that particular document twice. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes went very still. "Mr. Whitmore," Richard said, "this memo was submitted without Evelyn's knowledge. I had a fiduciary responsibility." "To your own position," Richard said, "not to the company." He set the document down with the careful precision of a man putting something toxic at a distance. "The board will recess for deliberation." Andrew looked across the table at Evelyn. She held his eyes. She did not look away. She did not look triumphant. She did not look angry. She looked like a woman who had done what needed to be done and was prepared to live with every consequence of it. He was the one who looked away first. The board's decision took 4 hours. When they returned, Richard informed Andrew that his executive role was being suspended pending a full audit of the internal communications. He was asked to surrender his building access immediately. Andrew stood up from the table. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at Evelyn one final time. "You think this is over," he said. "I think this chapter is," she said. He walked out. Nobody in the room said anything for a long moment. Then, Diana, who had been sitting against the wall with a laptop and 12 years of composed professionalism, exhaled audibly. Several board members began shuffling papers. Richard looked at Evelyn with the expression of someone who had just watched a complicated and necessary thing conclude. "Well done," he said quietly. "Just that." Evelyn nodded. She walked to her office. She closed the door. She sat down. And for exactly 90 seconds, she let herself feel the full weight of everything. The 2 years she had not seen it the night at the gala. The weeks of documentation and board preparation. The grinding exhaustion of fighting a war in your own house while continuing to run it. 90 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called Michael. He answered on the second ring. She could hear the background sounds of the shop metal air compressor, the particular ambient noise of a space where physical work happened. "It's done," she said. A pause. "Then tell me," she told him. Not the legal version. The real version. The way Andrew had looked when he walked out. The way Richard had said well done with that particular economy of a person who did not waste words. The way the room had felt when the door closed behind Andrew and everyone in it understood that something real had shifted. Michael listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "How do you feel?" She thought about it honestly. "Tired," she said, "and clear. Like I've been seeing through dirty glass for 2 years and someone just cleaned it." "That's what clarity costs sometimes," he said. "It costs a lot," she agreed. "You still standing?" She almost laughed. "Yes, Michael, I'm still standing." "Good," he said. "That's what matters." She sat in her office for another hour after hanging up. She read through her emails. She had 347 unread messages. She started at the top and worked down with the focused calm of someone who had cleared the largest obstacle and could now address everything behind it. She did not think about Michael again until she was in her car at 7:30, and then she thought about him with the particular helpless quality of someone who has tried to stop thinking about something and has been completely unsuccessful. She was in trouble. She knew that. The kind of trouble that didn't come from enemies or market conditions or board votes. The kind that came from the inside. She had spent 15 years building walls that were sophisticated enough that she'd stopped thinking of them as walls. She called them professionalism, focus, discipline. But Michael Brooks, without ever trying, had walked through every single one of them. And now she was sitting in her car in a parking garage, thinking about the way his voice sounded when he said, "Just you," and she was thoroughly, completely in trouble. She drove home and told herself to be careful. She was not careful. The following Saturday, she was back at the shop. This time, she brought lunch. She had stopped at a place that Michael had mentioned once offhandedly as the best sandwich shop within 3 miles of his neighborhood. He had not expected her to remember. She had remembered everything. He looked at the bag when she arrived, then looked at her. "You went to Murphy's," he said. You mentioned it. I mentioned it once. I have a good memory, she said. He took the bag with a look that meant something she wasn't ready to name. Come look at the Camaro, he said. Engine's finally right. She knew nothing about engines. She stood beside him and listened while he explained what had been wrong and what fixing it had required, and she found that she didn't need to understand the mechanical language to follow what he was saying. Because what he was really saying was, this thing was broken in a way that wasn't visible from the outside, and finding what was wrong required patience, and fixing it required care, and now it runs the way it was always supposed to. She understood that language perfectly. You love this car, she said. I love the work, he said. The car is the result. What's the difference? He considered. The car is finished. The work is what mattered. He ran a hand along the hood with the unself-conscious ease of someone doing something completely natural. If I only cared about the result, I'd rush every job, cut corners, get it done, and get it out. But the work is where the thing actually lives. The result is just proof. Evelyn looked at him. You know that's not just about cars, she said. Most things I say about cars aren't just about cars, he said simply. They ate the sandwiches, sitting on two mismatched stools in the shop because there was nowhere else immediately available, and neither of them suggested moving. Lily was inside doing something that periodically produced dramatic sighing sounds through the open window. Homework, Michael said. Almost certainly history. She had strong feelings about history. She told me last week that Andrew sounds like a case study in narcissistic supply, Evelyn said. Michael closed his eyes briefly. She told me she looked him up. She looked him up. She has a very protective instinct, he said, and his voice had the resigned affection of a father who has long since accepted that his daughter is going to be exactly who she is, regardless of his preferences. I asked her to stay out of it. She's not wrong, Evelyn said. She's 14. She's right. Michael looked at her. Don't tell her that. I already did, Evelyn said. He shook his head, but he was smiling. They were quiet for a while in the good way. The comfortable silence that had become the signature of their time together. Evelyn had stopped needing to fill it. That alone told her something about how much she had changed in the last several weeks, because she had spent 15 years filling silence with agenda items. Can I ask you something? She said. Yeah, when I told you about the anonymous donor that night in the diner. She watched his face. You froze. I noticed it, but I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I'd actually seen it. Michael set down his sandwich. You noticed, he said. It was not a question. I notice everything, she said. Occupational habit. I was quiet for long enough that she felt the shape of what was coming before he said it. Something had been living in the space between them for weeks. Something he had been carrying carefully, and she had been circling without landing. Michael, she said. I donated through a program at Mass General, he said. 7 years ago, anonymously, a rare biological match for a patient with a chronic condition. I never knew who the patient was. He stopped. The program coordinator told me later that the patient had sent letters. She offered to share them with me. I said yes. He looked at her steadily. I kept them. The shop went very quiet. Evelyn heard every word. She felt them land one at a time in a specific order. The letters, she said slowly. Yes. That I wrote. Yes. She looked at him. He looked back at her. Neither of them looked away. You knew, she said, when I told you about it that night. I suspected, he said. The company, the diagnosis, the timing. I was almost certain. He held her eyes. I didn't say anything because I didn't want it to change what was happening between us. I didn't want you to feel obligated, or grateful, or like you had to. How long have you known? Her voice was even. She was working very hard to keep it even. Since the second week, he said. After you told me about the research unit you built for people with your condition. The way you described it matched things in the letters closely enough that I was certain. The second week. He had known since the second week. She stood up from the stool. Evelyn? I need a minute, she said. She walked to the far end of the shop and stood with her back to him and her hands at her sides and breathed. She was not performing calm. She was building it deliberately, one breath at a time, the way she had learned to build things under pressure. She was not sure what she felt. That was the problem. Usually she knew exactly what she felt. She had a very accurate internal compass for her own emotional state. But right now, the needle was spinning. Hai had known. He had kept it from her. He had been sitting across from her at that table twice a week for weeks, looking at her with those steady eyes, saying those true and careful things, while carrying a secret that changed the architecture of everything she thought she understood about what was between them. She turned around. He was still sitting on the stool. He had not moved toward her. He had given her the space she asked for without being asked twice. That was so completely him that it made her chest ache. "Say the rest of it," she said. "The rest of it is that I didn't tell you because I wanted what was between us to belong to us," he said. "Not to what happened 7 years ago. Not to a donation I made without knowing who it would reach. Not to your gratitude or my—" He paused, searching for the word, my not knowing how to say it without it sounding like I wanted something from it. "Did you?" she said. "Want something?" "No," he said. "I never wanted anything from it. I did it because someone needed it and I could give it. That was the whole thing. That was everything." He looked at her with the same directness that had been present since the first night, unchanged and undefended. "And I didn't tell you because I was afraid that the moment I said it, you'd stop seeing me and start seeing a debt. And I didn't want to be your debt. I wanted to be—" He stopped. "What?" she said. "Just Michael," he said. "I wanted to be just Michael." The shop was completely still. Lily's window had gone quiet. Somewhere outside, a car passed. Evelyn looked at the man sitting on the stool in the shop he had built with a bank loan and a work ethic and his father's lessons, and she understood something with a completeness that felt almost physical. He had saved her life without ever knowing her name. And then he had let her sit down at his table without telling her. And then he had listened to her and talked to her and made room for her and said true things in a quiet voice and laughed at slightly burned garlic bread and let his daughter interrogate her about water rights policy and stood beside her at a sink in the most ordinary possible moment and told her she didn't have to be anything specific. He had done all of that after knowing. He had kept the secret not to protect himself. He had kept it to protect her right to choose. "You could have told me at any point," she said. "You chose not to." "Yes." "Because you didn't want me to feel obligated." "Yes." "So every conversation we've had for the last 6 weeks was real," he said. "All of it was real. What I knew didn't change what I said. It didn't change anything I did. I knew and I chose to let you meet me without it." She crossed the floor and stood in front of him. She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm angry," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm angry because you took a choice away from me." "Yes. And I understand why you did it." He waited. "That makes it more complicated," she said. "Not less." "I know that too," he said. She was very close to him now, close enough to see the tension in his jaw. That was the only sign he was not as composed as he appeared. He was holding himself very still in the way of someone who was letting another person decide something important and refusing to influence the outcome. That quality, that restraint, that choosing not to push it, was so specifically him that it cut right through the anger and found something underneath it. "I wrote those letters to a stranger," she said, "and I meant every word." "I know," he said quietly. "I said that because of what you did, I got to try again. I got to build something. I remember." "I meant that," she said. "I still mean it." She stepped back, not away, just giving herself space to think clearly, which was difficult at this distance. "I need time," she said. "Take it," he said, without hesitation. She picked up her bag. "Michael." She stopped at the edge of the shop. "The letters. You kept them?" "Yes." "On hard days," she said. It was not quite a question. He looked at her. "Yes." She nodded once. She left. She drove home with her hands very steady on the wheel and her mind running at the particular speed it reached when something important needed processing. She did not call Diana. She did not call anyone. She sat in her apartment in the quiet and thought. He had donated anonymously. He had never sought her out. The meeting in the diner had been pure chance, her escaping a destroyed evening, him waiting out an empty house, two people coincidentally occupying the same small space in a rainy city. Nothing about it had been calculated. He had recognized her. He had suspected. He had said nothing. Not because he wanted to protect himself, but because he wanted to protect her freedom. She thought about Andrew. Andrew, who had walked into her life with a plan already assembled, who had learned her vulnerabilities and filed them, who had used everything she trusted him with. And then she thought about Michael, who had known something extraordinary about her and had kept it specifically so it couldn't be used. The contrast was not subtle. She sat with it for a long time. She opened her laptop and found the folder she had not opened in years. The hospital communication archive. The documentation from the treatment that had saved her life at 32. She found the record of the anonymous donation. She found the section of her own files where she had kept copies of the letters she had sent to the program coordinator. She read them. Her own words from 7 years ago. When she was 32 and terrified and furious and fighting, and someone she would never meet had given her a resource that was nearly impossible to obtain. I don't know your name, she had written, but I think about what you did on the days when I'm most afraid. You gave me a chance I didn't earn and didn't deserve, except by being alive and needing it. I'm going to try to deserve it. I'm going to try every day to build something worth the second chance you gave me. She read that and then sat very still. She had built the company. She had built the research unit. She had fought for 7 years to build something that would mean other people had access to what she had barely survived without. She had done all of it, and the person who had made it possible had been sitting across a diner table, eating a sandwich and talking about a 1969 Camaro. She was not angry anymore. She was not sure what she was. Something enormous and quiet. She closed the laptop. She thought about what she had said to him. I need time. She thought about what he had said back immediately without making her justify it. Take it. No negotiation. No push. Just yes. She picked up her phone. She did not call him. It was late, and Lily would be asleep, and some conversations needed daylight and the right kind of space. But she sat with her phone in her hands, and she thought about a man who had kept her letters in a drawer, not because he wanted anything from them, but because on the hard days, her words had helped him too. A stranger's gratitude had traveled in both directions. She had not known that was possible. She put her phone down and sat in the quiet of her apartment and felt underneath everything the complicated anger, the grief of the last several months, the exhaustion of the board fight and the gala, and the 2 years before it, something that she had not felt since before her diagnosis. Hope. Not the strategic kind she used in presentations. The real kind. The kind that didn't ask what the return was. The kind her father had kept a garden for. She fell asleep on the couch with the light still on, and she dreamed about nothing she could remember when she woke up. And in the morning she called Diana and worked through until noon, and then got in her car and drove to the auto shop without calling ahead. Michael was under a different car this time. He rolled out when he heard her come in. He looked at her face and read it with the accuracy that had startled her since the beginning. He sat up. He did not say anything. He waited. I read the letters, she said. He nodded. I meant them, she said. Every word. I know. I also meant what I said yesterday. She looked at him directly. I'm still angry. About the weeks of knowing. About the choice that was mine to make that you made for me. She stopped. But I understand why. And understanding why doesn't erase the anger, but it... She looked for the word. It changes the shape of it. He was watching her with that complete attention. I don't want to love you because you saved my life, she said. She saw something move across his face. I don't want that to be the foundation, she said. I don't want to wake up 5 years from now and not know if what I feel is real, or if it's gratitude I dressed up as something else. She met his eyes. So I need you to know that I'm aware of the difference, and I need some time to make sure I'm standing on the right side of it. "Evelyn," he said. "I'll take the time I need," she said. "And then I'll know. And when I know, I'll tell you." He looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," he said. "That's it," she said. "Just okay. What else should I say?" He picked up his wrench and turned it in his hands. "You know what you need. You're one of the most self-aware people I've met. If you say you need time to separate the layers, then you need time. I'm not going to argue with you about your own interior." She stared at him. "You are the most infuriating person," she said. He looked up. "Because I agreed with you. Because you keep being exactly right when I'm trying to be upset with you." Something softened in his face. Not quite a smile. The thing that lived underneath a smile. "I'll be here," he said. "However long it takes." She believed him. She drove back to the city, and Andrew Whitmore, who had been suspended from his executive role, but who had not for a single moment stopped working, sat in his home office and looked at a photograph on his screen. It was a photograph from a social media post. Lily Brooks, 14 years old, posted 3 weeks ago, a photo from inside a shop, someone's car in the background, and in the corner of the frame, unmistakable, Evelyn Carter laughing. Andrew had not been looking for it. His assistant had found it while running routine monitoring on Evelyn's public presence. He looked at the photo for a long time. Then he made a call. "I need everything you can find," he said, "on a man named Michael Brooks. Auto restoration shop, Boston area. Find out who he is. Find out how he knows Evelyn Carter. And find out if there's anything connecting him to her past." He hung up. He looked at the photograph again. He did not know what he was looking for yet, but he was very good at finding things. And whatever was between Evelyn Carter and this man from the auto shop, Andrew Whitmore intended to find it before it could cost him anything else. He was already too late to stop what had started. He did not know that yet, but he would find out. And when he did, he was going to use it with everything he had. Andrew's investigator was good at his job. It took him 4 days. 4 days to find the hospital program. 4 days to trace the anonymous donor records through a chain of semi-public documentation that should have been impossible to follow, but wasn't. If you knew which doors to knock on, and which names to drop, and which privacy protocols had enough flex in them to be bent without quite breaking. On the 5th day, Andrew Whitmore had a folder on his desk. He read it twice. Then he sat back in his chair and smiled the particular smile of a man who had been losing and had just found the one thing he needed to change the board. Michael Brooks, anonymous donor, Mass General Hospital Biological Resource Program. 7 years ago. Rare match for a patient with a chronic autoimmune condition. Patient name protected. But the timing, the condition profile, the program documentation, it all aligned with Evelyn's medical history with a precision that left no room for alternative interpretation. Andrew did not rush. That was the thing about Andrew that Evelyn had never fully understood until it was too late. He did not rush. He was patient in the way that predators were patient, not because he was calm, but because he understood that timing was the weapon. Strike too early, and the target had time to recover. Strike at the exact right moment, and the damage was permanent. He spent 3 days building the narrative before he deployed it. He chose a financial journalist named Carter Wells. No relation to Evelyn, which was an irony. He appreciated who had been covering the Carter Health Board situation since the gala. Wells was ambitious and careful, which made him credible, and he had a readership that overlapped precisely with Evelyn's investor base. Andrew did not send the full file. He sent enough. He sent the documentation of the donation. He sent a carefully constructed timeline showing Michael's anonymity, the match to Evelyn's condition, and the subsequent relationship between them. He did not say Michael had planned it. He simply laid the facts in an order that made a particular conclusion feel inevitable. He let the implication do the work. The story ran on a Wednesday morning. The headline read, "Anonymous Donor or Calculated Access. The Man Behind Carter. Health CEO's Recovery and Her Boardroom Battle." Evelyn was in a 7 o'clock staff meeting when Diana walked in without knocking, which Diana had not done in 11 years of working together. She crossed the room and set her phone face up on the table in front of Evelyn without a word. Evelyn read the headline. She read the first 3 paragraphs. She looked up at the room full of people watching her face. "Give me the room," she said. Everyone filed out, except Diana. Evelyn read the full article. Then she set the phone down and put both hands flat on the table and looked at the far wall. "He found the hospital records," she said. "Not the patient file," Diana said. "Your name isn't in the piece, but it doesn't need to be. Anyone who knows your medical history can connect it." "Which means everyone on the board." "Yes." Evelyn was quiet for 10 seconds. "What's the board's reaction?" "Richard called me 12 minutes ago. He's angry. Not at you." Diana paused. "At the situation." "Meaning they're asking questions." "Meaning they're asking why a man with a documented connection to your medical history entered your personal life immediately after the gala, and whether that connection was disclosed to them as a material relationship." Evelyn absorbed that. The thing about being very good at strategy was that you could follow the logic of an attack even when you were the target. She could see exactly what Andrew had constructed. He hadn't needed to prove anything. He had only needed to introduce doubt. An anonymous donor who happened to be a perfect match. Who happened to encounter her in a diner the same week Andrew fell from power. Who happened to become a fixture in her personal life during the most vulnerable period of her professional tenure. It didn't matter that none of it was planned. It didn't matter that the diner had been rain and coincidence and a single empty chair. Doubt didn't require proof. Doubt only required a question that nobody could immediately answer. She picked up her phone. She did not call Michael first. She called her legal team. She called Richard. She spent 90 minutes managing the professional perimeter with the focused efficiency that had built her company, and she did it without letting any of the other feeling come to the surface, because the surface needed to be controlled right now. Then she called Michael. He picked up on the first ring. "I already saw it," he said. His voice was completely flat, in a way she had not heard from him before. Not cold, compressed, like something had been pressed down hard and was being held there with effort. "Are you okay?" she said. "I'm worried about you," he said. "Not me." "I'm asking about you." A pause. "I'm angry," he said. "I don't get angry easily, but right now angry. At Andrew. At what he did to you," Michael said. Again, with different material. She heard it in his voice, the same quality she had first noticed across that diner table. That deep and unpretentious protectiveness that came from someone who didn't protect things for leverage. He was angry on her behalf, not his own. It nearly undid her composure. "Evelyn," he said, "whatever you need to do publicly, whatever decision you need to make about me, about the connection, about how you handle the board, do it. I mean that. Don't protect me at cost to yourself." "Stop," she said. "I mean it." "I know you mean it," she said. "That's exactly why I'm telling you to stop." He went quiet. "You are not a liability," she said. "I'm not going to treat you like one. I'm not asking you to protect me." "I know," she said. "I'm choosing to." The silence between them was different from their usual silences. Tighter. Charged. "There's going to be a board meeting," she said. "Today. Richard is convening it. I need to be there in 2 hours." "Go," he said. "I'll call you after." "I'll be here," he said. She hung up. The board meeting was not the worst meeting Evelyn Carter had ever sat through. The worst meeting had been the one at 32, when her doctor had laid out a diagnosis and a set of statistical probabilities in the same flat professional tone that people used to discuss weather forecasts. That meeting had been worse. This was second. Richard opened by reading the article aloud. Not because everyone hadn't read it already, because it needed to be in the room formally. He read it in the same even voice he brought to everything, and when he finished, he set the printout down and looked at Evelyn. "We need the full picture," he said. "From you." She gave it. She told them everything. The gala night. The diner. The chair. The fact that she had given only her first name, and he had not asked for more. The weeks of conversation that had been for her the first genuine human connection she had allowed herself in years. The moment he had told her the truth about the donation, the anger, the time she had asked for, the investigation Andrew had clearly been running on her personal life while suspended from his professional one. She told them all of it in the same clear, unsparing language she used for quarterly reports. When she finished, the room was quiet. A board member named Patricia Osei, who was 63 and had a background in medical ethics and said very little in meetings but listened with extraordinary precision, spoke first. "He told you voluntarily," Patricia said. "Yes," Evelyn said. "Before you discovered it any other way." "Yes. And his response to the article was to tell you to make whatever decision you needed for the company without concern for himself." "Yes." Patricia looked at the table. "That is not the behavior of someone who engineered access for personal gain." "No," Evelyn said, "it isn't." Richard looked around the table. "Does anyone here believe that a man who donated anonymously 7 years ago and said nothing about it for weeks, including when it would have been strategically advantageous, was running a calculated plan? Silence, not agreement, but the particular silence of people who are thinking clearly. The question before us," Richard said, "is not Michael Brooks. The question is Andrew Whitmore, who obtained and disclosed protected medical-adjacent information, who is currently suspended, and who has now clearly been conducting surveillance on our CEO's personal relationships while that suspension is ongoing." Another board member, James Cho, leaned forward. "That last part is a separate legal issue." "Yes," Richard said. "It is." The meeting lasted another hour. When it ended, the board had made 3 decisions. First, they were expanding their investigation of Andrew to include the disclosure to the journalist and whatever information gathering had produced it. Second, they were issuing a public statement clarifying that the relationship between Evelyn and Michael Brooks had been reviewed and presented no conflict of interest material to the company's governance. Third, they were moving to formally terminate Andrew's executive agreement, effective immediately. Evelyn walked out of that meeting with the specific controlled calm of someone who has been holding a tremendous amount of weight for a long time and has just been told it is almost over. Diana was waiting in the hallway. "Well," Diana said. "It's done," Evelyn said. "The real done this time." Diana exhaled. "Good Lord. Call legal," Evelyn said. "They're going to need to coordinate on the Whitmore termination and get me the draft of the public statement before it goes out. I want to review the language." "Already on it," Diana said. Evelyn nodded. She started walking. "Evelyn," Diana said. She stopped. "Go see him," Diana said. "The statement can wait an hour." Evelyn looked at her. 11 years, Diana said. "I've watched you manage everything from a distance. Every problem at arm's length. Every person at arm's length." She paused. "Go. I'll handle the next 2 hours." Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. Then she went. Michael's shop was open. She could hear him working before she reached the door, the particular rhythm of someone doing physical labor with focused energy, which she had learned to read as his version of processing difficult emotion. He worked harder when he was thinking hard. He stopped when she walked in. He looked at her face. "Bored," he said. "Done," she said. "The right way." He set down the tool in his hand. "And Andrew, terminated," she said. "And they're opening an investigation into how he obtained the hospital documentation, which is going to be an uncomfortable conversation for the journalist who ran the story and the investigator Andrew hired." Michael was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" he said. It was the same question she had asked him 3 hours ago. "I'm standing," she said. "Which is what you keep checking for, so." Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. She crossed the shop and stopped 2 feet from him. "I have something to say," she said. "Okay," he said. He was very still. "I've had 4 days," she said. "Since the shop. Since I said I needed time." She held his eyes. "I've been thinking about what I said. About not wanting to love you because you saved my life. About needing to know which side of that line I was standing on." He waited. "I know," she said. "You know," he said. "I know," she said again. Because the moment I read that article this morning, my first thought wasn't about the board, or the investors, or the public statement, or any of the 12 professional fires that needed putting out. She stopped. My first thought was that someone had tried to use you against me, and that I was not going to let that happen. He looked at her. That's not gratitude, she said. Gratitude doesn't make you want to protect someone. It makes you want to repay them. What I felt this morning when I read what Andrew did, that wasn't debt. That was... She stopped. Michael, that was mine. That was entirely mine. And it had nothing to do with 7 years ago. He took one step toward her. Evelyn, he said. I'm not finished, she said. You said you wanted me to choose you because of who you were, not because of what you gave me, so I'm telling you. She kept her voice steady with effort. You are the most infuriating, quietly right, genuinely decent person I have encountered in 15 years of meeting people. You make garlic bread that is slightly too burned, and you let your 14-year-old daughter win arguments even when you're right, and you keep strangers' letters in a drawer because their words helped you on hard days. She stopped. I am choosing you, because of who you are. Do you understand the difference? I was very close now. Yes, he said. I understand the difference. Good, she said. He put his hand against the side of her face. His palm was warm and rough and completely certain. She leaned into it exactly 1/2 inch. That half inch, she thought. That was the whole thing. That was the movement she had been building toward for months without knowing it. Not the speeches, not the board meetings, not the survival. Just that half inch toward someone who had made room for her at a table in the rain and asked nothing back. He kissed her. It was not a dramatic kiss. It was not the kind that happened in movies with swelling music and perfect lighting. It was quiet and real and entirely right the way things were, right when they had been built correctly from the beginning, when no corner had been cut, and no part had been rushed, and the work had been done with the patience it deserved. When they separated, she was still standing very close. The garlic bread, she said. It was one time, he said. It was not one time, she said. He laughed, low and easy and real, and she felt it like something coming loose in her chest, some last piece of held tension finally releasing like a fastening that had been too tight for years and had finally been given room. Lily appeared in the doorway from the house. She looked at them. She looked at the proximity, at the expression on her father's face, at the expression on Evelyn's face. Finally, she said with the absolute unimpressed certainty of a 14-year-old who had seen this coming for weeks. I was starting to think I was going to have to schedule an intervention. Lily, Michael said. I'm going back inside, she said. I'm making dinner. Don't make it weird. She disappeared. Evelyn put her forehead against Michael's shoulder. She was laughing. She had not laughed like this without strategy, without calculation, without the performance of levity in longer than she could accurately remember. She knew before we did, Evelyn said. She knew before I did, Michael said. She told me 3 weeks ago that I was obvious. She was right. She usually is. He paused. It's exhausting. They stayed like that for a moment. Then Evelyn straightened. There was still a board statement to review, a legal team to coordinate, a journalist and an investigator who had some uncomfortable conversations coming, a company to run, and a transition to manage, and approximately 300 things that needed doing before the end of the week. All of that was still true, but it had a different weight now. I have to go back, she said. Diana is covering for me and she has a limit. I know, he said. I'll call you tonight. I'll answer, he said. She picked up her bag. She was at the door when she turned around one more time. Michael, she said. He looked at her. The letters, she said. The ones you kept. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm glad you kept them, she said. I'm glad they were useful to someone. I'm glad it was you. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She walked out. On the drive back to the office, her phone rang. Diana. She answered immediately. Statements ready for your review, Diana said. Legal has the Whitmore termination paperwork, and Richard wants a 5-minute call before end of day. Set it all up, Evelyn said. Also, Diana said, and her voice shifted slightly. "The Carter Wells piece has been taken down." Evelyn blinked. "Taken down. 40 minutes ago. No statement from the publication yet, but my guess is that someone's attorney called and used words like protected health information and tortious interference, and the publication decided the story wasn't worth the exposure." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Andrew," she said. "His leverage is gone," Diana said. "And now he's the one with the legal problem." "Yes," Evelyn said. "He is." She drove the rest of the way in silence that felt different from any silence she could remember. Not the silence of someone managing. Not the controlled quiet of a person holding everything at careful distance. Just silence. The ordinary, adequate, entirely sufficient silence of someone who was exactly where they were supposed to be. She walked back into Carter Health Innovations at 3 in the afternoon, and she went directly to her office, and she sat down, and she worked through the statement, and the legal coordination, and Richard's call with the competence she had always brought to everything. But she worked differently. Something in her posture was different. Something in the way she moved through the building was different. Diana noticed it first. She watched Evelyn walk from her office to the conference room and back, and then she sent a single message to her personal phone that said only good. Evelyn read it and smiled. 2 floors down in a parking structure. Andrew Whitmore was using to avoid the lobby cameras. He sat in his car and stared at his phone. The article was down. His investigator had just informed him that the hospital program had flagged the documentation request and was cooperating with the board's expanded inquiry. 3 of his closest board allies had stopped returning his calls. He had planned this for 2 years. He had executed it with precision. He had used every tool he had, and a man who fixed old cars and made slightly burned garlic bread had undone it without trying, simply by being exactly who he was. Andrew could not understand it. He sat there for a long time. Then he started his car and drove away, and he did not come back. That evening, Lily made pasta. The same pasta, same jar sauce, same garlic bread under the broiler for slightly too long, and the 3 of them sat at the kitchen table, and Lily gave a detailed account of why her position on the Dust Bowl's economic legacy was objectively correct, and her history teacher was coming around, and Michael washed, and Evelyn dried, and the silence between them in front of the sink was the best kind. The kind that didn't need anything. The kind that already had everything. Evelyn drove home later than she had planned, and she sat in her car in the parking garage and thought about the distance she had traveled. Not geographically, the other kind. From a woman standing at a gala podium, watching her carefully constructed world detonate to a woman who had stood in a shop and said, "I am choosing you because of who you are." She had not planned any of it. She had not been able to plan any of it. Some things, she understood now, could not be built from strategy. They could only be lived toward. One honest conversation at a time. One real moment at a time. 1/2 inch at a time in the right direction towards someone who had made room. She got out of the car. She went inside. She slept better than she had in 2 years. The weeks after Andrew left the building were not quiet. Evelyn had not expected quiet. She had built her entire professional life on the understanding that nothing worth having arrived without cost, and the aftermath of Andrew Whitmore's removal from Carter Health Innovations cost considerably. Legal proceedings. Regulatory disclosures. 3 board members who had been aligned with Andrew and now needed to be managed, not removed, not yet, but watched and engaged and gradually redirected. Investor calls that required Evelyn to be simultaneously transparent about what had happened and confident about what came next, which was a difficult combination to sustain for weeks on end without letting the seams show. She sustained it. She had been sustaining difficult combinations for 15 years. What was different now was that when she got home at night, she called Michael. Not always for long. Sometimes just 10 minutes. Sometimes he was putting Lily to bed and could only talk for 5. But the call happened, and the specific quality of hearing his voice at the end of a day that had required everything she had that became something she did not want to do without. She told him that on a Tuesday night in November, sitting on her couch with her shoes off and a cup of tea going cold on the table. "I don't want to do without this," she said. "The calls. I want you to know that." A pause on his end. "I don't want to do without them either," he said. "I'm not good at this," she said. "Whatever this is becoming. I'm good at a lot of things. This is not one of them." "You're doing fine," he said. "I'm telling you, I don't want to lose this at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. That's not sophisticated." "No," he said. "It's honest." Another pause. "I like it better than sophisticated." She smiled at her ceiling. "Lily would say you're stumbling into insight again." "Lily says a lot of things. She's usually right." "Please," he said, "do not let her hear you say that." She laughed. She was doing that more, she had noticed. Laughing in the middle of difficult weeks. Laughing over small things. Laughing the way people laughed when they weren't performing humor, but were simply in the presence of something that made life feel lighter than it had been. Diana noticed. Patricia Osei noticed the next time she visited the office. Richard noticed. He said nothing, but he smiled in a way that told her he had seen it. The company noticed because Evelyn Carter was still working with the same precision and intelligence she always had, but the sharp defensive edge that had been part of her professional presence for years had softened into something that was somehow both warmer and more authoritative. She was less brittle. She was less contained. She was more entirely herself. And she was, it turned out, more effective for it. The board dynamics shifted over the following month. 2 of the 3 Andrew-aligned members retired early, with severance arrangements that everyone understood were face-saving rather than rewarding. The third, a man named Gerald Sims, who had been on the board for 9 years and who Evelyn had always suspected was smarter than his allegiances suggested, requested a private meeting in December. She gave him 30 minutes. He spent the first 10 acknowledging that he had allowed Andrew's framing to influence his perception of Evelyn's leadership. He spent the next 10 explaining why he had done it. Institutional conservatism, risk aversion, a genuine but misapplied concern about succession planning. He spent the last 10 asking what it would take to rebuild her confidence in him as a board member. She listened to all of it. Then she said, "Gerald, I don't need your loyalty. I need your honest assessment. Every time, in every room, even when it's inconvenient. Can you give me that?" He looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said. "I can." "Then we're fine," she said. He stood to leave and then stopped. "You're different," he said. "I've clarified," she said. "It's different from different." He nodded, and something in his expression told her he understood more than he was saying. He left. She went back to work. December brought the annual report cycle, which was its own particular form of pressure numbers and narratives, and the delicate art of presenting truth in a way that preserved confidence without sanitizing reality. Evelyn worked 16-hour days for 2 weeks. She saw Michael less during that stretch and felt the reduction like a missing thing, which was new. She was not accustomed to feeling the absence of people. She had been accustomed to feeling the absence of sleep and time and resources, but not people. She told him that on a Sunday, when she finally had a full afternoon free. They were at the shop. Lily was at a debate tournament. Michael was not working for once, just sitting, which she had learned was rare, and which he did with the same unhurried quality that he brought to everything. "I felt it," she said. "The last 2 weeks, when I didn't see you." He looked at her. "I felt it too," he said. "How long has that been true for you?" she asked. He considered. "Longer than I was ready to admit," he said. "Since the garlic bread dinner, maybe." "That was weeks ago." "Yeah," he said. She shook her head. "You kept that to yourself for weeks. You had a board situation. Michael. And an ongoing legal matter. Michael. And you'd asked for time," he said simply. She looked at him. "You waited," she said. "Because I asked for time." "Yes. For weeks." "You needed it," he said. "That's not a complicated calculation." She thought about Andrew, who had not waited for anything, who had taken what he needed when he needed it without regard for what it cost her. She thought about the years she had spent in a relationship with a man who had treated her timeline and her pace and her carefully constructed sense of safety as obstacles to move around rather than things to respect. She thought about the difference. She had known the difference intellectually for months. She felt it in her chest now completely and without ambiguity. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Okay," he said. "I was 32 when I almost died," she said. "You know that. But what I haven't said out loud to anyone, not my doctors, not Diana, not anyone, is that the thing I was most afraid of wasn't dying." She stopped. It was dying without having done anything real, without having been real. I had the company. I had the goals. I had the 15-year plan. But I was so locked inside the performance of being capable that I don't think I was actually present for any of it. She held his eyes. "When I recovered, I told myself that was going to change. And it did change professionally. I built something real. I made decisions that mattered. But personally—" She stopped again. "Personally," he said quietly, filling in the space. "I kept the walls," she said. "I just painted them nicer." He was looking at her with that complete attention that had undone her from the beginning. "And now," he said, "now I'm sitting in your shop on a Sunday afternoon telling you the thing I haven't told anyone," she said. "So I think the walls are gone." He reached across and took her hand. Not dramatically, not with declarations. Just took her hand and held it in the easy, certain way of someone who has decided something and is no longer negotiating with the decision. She did not pull back. They sat like that for a while. "I want to show you something," he said eventually. He went inside and came back with an envelope. Old. The edges worn soft. He held it for a moment before he gave it to her, and she understood from the way he held it what it was before she opened it. She took it from him carefully. Inside were 3 letters printed on paper that had once been white and had aged to the color of old cream. Her handwriting. 7 years ago. She recognized it the way you recognized your own voice played back slightly. Strange, slightly younger, entirely yours. She read the first one. She had written it 6 weeks after the treatment, when the worst of the acute phase had passed, and she had been able to sit up and think clearly for the first time in weeks. She had asked the program coordinator how to reach the donor. They had said anonymous, but they had offered to forward a letter. She had written 3 over the following month. "I don't know your name," said the first. "I don't know who you are, or why you did what you did. I only know that I'm alive when I wasn't supposed to be, and that you are part of the reason. I don't have language for what that is. Gratitude doesn't cover it. Gratitude is for small things. This is larger than gratitude." She read the second. "I've been thinking about what it means to give something to a person you'll never meet. There's no transaction in it. No return. You gave something precious with no expectation of anything back. I've spent my whole life in a world where everything is a transaction, and what you did doesn't fit any framework I have. I've been trying to build a new one." She read the third. "I'm starting to understand what I want to do with the time you gave back to me. I want to build something that matters. I want to make sure other people have access to what I barely survived without. I want to live a life that is worth the cost of what you gave. I promise you, stranger, that I will not waste this. On the days when I'm most afraid, I'll remember that someone I never met believed it was worth it to try." She folded the letters back into the envelope. Her hands were steady. She was proud of that. She looked at Michael. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Something open and unguarded. The look of a person who has been holding something delicate for a very long time and has finally set it down. "You read these," she said. "Many times," he said. "On the hard days." "On the hard days," he said. "After the custody battle. When the shop was struggling. When Lily was going through something I didn't know how to help with. I'd read you saying you weren't going to waste it, that you'd try." He stopped. "It helped me try too." She was quiet for a moment. "We helped each other," she said, without knowing. "Yes," he said. "A stranger's words in a drawer," she said. "And a stranger's donation in a medical file." "Yes." She looked at the envelope in her hands. "Michael," she said. "Yeah." "I want to keep these," she said. "Not because they're mine, because they belong to this. to what this is. He looked at her. Then keep them, he said. She did. Christmas came the way. Christmas came in Boston fast and cold and bright. Lily had strong opinions about the tree, which she expressed with the focused intensity she brought to everything, and Michael let her win the argument about height, because he almost always let her win arguments that were more about principle than practicality. And Evelyn stood in the living room of the small house and watched the two of them negotiate over tree stand placement, and felt something so enormous and simple that she had to look away for a second to contain it. She had been alone at Christmas for 4 years. Not entirely alone, she had attended dinners and parties and events. But alone in the way that mattered. The way where the celebrations were populated, but the person at the center of them was somewhere separate watching through glass. She was not watching through glass now. "You're doing it again," Lily said from across the room. Evelyn looked at her. "Doing what?" "The thing where you look like you can't believe you're here," Lily said. She said it with the direct, unfiltered honesty that was entirely her own. "You do it every time you come over, like you keep expecting someone to tell you there's been a mistake." Evelyn was briefly speechless. Michael gave his daughter a look. "What?" Lily said. "She does." "It's all right," Evelyn said. "She's not wrong." Lily considered her. "You should stop expecting that," she said. "There's no mistake. You're supposed to be here." She turned back to the tree with the efficiency of someone who had delivered a verdict and was moving on. "Can someone hand me the star?" Michael handed her the star without comment. But he caught Evelyn's eye over the top of Lily's head. She held his gaze. No mistake, Lily had said. She had spent 39 years building systems to protect herself from the possibility of a mistake. From the possibility of trusting wrong, choosing wrong, being wrong about what she needed. She had built the walls and called them strength and continued building long after the original threat had passed. And it had taken a 14-year-old with an unfiltered assessment and a very direct conversational style to say the simplest possible thing in response to all of it. "You're supposed to be here." Evelyn looked at the tree and felt the last of it release. The walls. The management. The performance. The careful, calibrated distance she had kept between herself and the possibility of being truly seen by someone who might leave. She let go of all of it. She was still herself. Still precise. Still capable of a board meeting that could reshape the trajectory of a billion-dollar company. Still the woman who had built something extraordinary out of fury and survival, and the refusal to accept the limits that illness and circumstance had tried to impose. But she was also this. Standing in a small living room with a slightly crooked Christmas tree and a man she loved, and his daughter who had just told her an obvious truth, as though it were the simplest thing in the world. Because Evelyn understood it was the simplest thing in the world. She had just needed someone to say it. The new year arrived and brought with it a round of industry coverage of Carter Health innovations that Evelyn had not orchestrated and had not expected. A major medical technology publication ran a piece on the company's research unit, the unit she had built specifically for patients with her condition, and its recent breakthrough in monitoring technology. The piece discussed the founder's personal connection to the work with a directness and accuracy that told Evelyn someone had been thorough. It also mentioned briefly that the CEO had emerged from a difficult year with her leadership position and her vision for the company stronger than before. Diana sent her the link at 7 in the morning with a message that said, "This is the story." Evelyn read it once. Then she forwarded it to Michael with no caption. He responded 4 minutes later. "This is you. All of this is you." She put her phone down and went back to work. 3 weeks into January. Something happened that Evelyn had not anticipated. She received a letter. Not an email. A letter handwritten in an envelope addressed to her directly at the Carter Health offices. The return address was a hospital in Worcester. She did not recognize the name on the return address until she opened the envelope and read the first line. "I don't know if you'll remember writing letters through the Mass General program 7 years ago," the letter began. "But I'm the program coordinator who forwarded them. My name is Anne Calloway. I'm reaching out because I've followed the news coverage this past year and I wanted you to know something." Evelyn read on. I never told the donor his match had survived. Program policy. Anonymous meant anonymous in both directions. But I kept your letters copies, which I shouldn't have, but I did, because I have worked in this program for 21 years, and those 3 letters were the most honest thing I have ever been given to forward. I have thought about them often. I thought about them when I read about your company's research breakthrough last year. I thought about them when I read about the difficulty you faced publicly. And I thought about them when I read the recent profile piece and understood that the donor and the recipient had somehow found each other. Evelyn's hands had gone completely still. I don't know how it happened. Anne Calloway's letter continued. I understand it may not be my business, but I wanted you to know that those letters did their job. They reached someone who needed them. And whatever happened next, that was beyond anything I could have arranged. That was just the world being kinder than it usually manages to be. I wish you both well. Evelyn read the letter twice. Then she sat at her desk in the office she had built and thought about the particular way that things connected. The invisible architecture of it. A donation made without knowing who it would reach. Letters written without knowing who would read them. A rainy night and a diner and a single empty chair. A woman who had asked, "Can I sit here?" and a man who had moved his jacket from the seat without asking why. She picked up her phone. I need to read you something, she said when Michael answered. She read him the letter. All of it. She read it evenly the way she read everything, and she got to the end, and the last line that was just the world being kinder than it usually manages to be, and her voice was steady for all of it, except that last line where it went quiet in a way that said everything she didn't say out loud. Michael was silent for a moment. 7 years ago, he said, a program coordinator kept letters she shouldn't have kept. Yes, Evelyn said, because they were worth keeping. Apparently, she said. Evelyn, he said. Yes, she said. We should go back to the diner, he said. She laughed. One short real sound. Yes, she said. We should. They went on a Thursday evening. No occasion, no reservation. The same diner, the same laminated menus, the same coffee smell that hit you when you walked through the door. It was raining again, which was not arranged, but which felt in the way that the right details always felt inevitable. The table was open. Of course it was. They sat down. The same server who recognized them now, who had stopped asking if they needed menus weeks ago, appeared and said, "The usual," and they said yes, which was a sentence that contained an entire year of becoming something. They sat across from each other and did not say anything for a moment. I asked you if I could sit here, Evelyn said. You did, he said. You moved your jacket. I did. You didn't ask who I was. No, he said. She looked at him across the table. The same table, the same lamp casting the same warm light. Outside Boston was doing what Boston did in January, cold and determined and entirely itself. I want to ask you something, she said. Okay, he said. Not for the company, she said. Not for any reason that has anything to do with strategy or positioning or what it looks like from the outside. She held his eyes. Just for me. Just because I want to know. Ask, he said. Are you happy? She said. Right now. This version of your life. He did not answer immediately. He looked at her the way he looked at things that deserved a real answer, with the patience of someone who believed that honest responses were worth the time they took. Yes, he said. I am. Because of Lily, she said. Because of Lily, he agreed. And because of the work. And because of the Camaro, which is finally done, by the way. A small pause. And because of you. She felt it. That particular warmth that she had stopped trying to manage or contain or explain to herself. She just felt it. I'm happy too, she said. I want you to know that. I don't say it easily. I have spent a significant portion of my adult life not saying things easily, but I'm saying it now. I know, he said. You know I'm happy. I know it doesn't come easily, he said. Which is why I believe you when you say it. She reached across the table. I took her hand, the same way he always did, easily, without ceremony, completely certain. Outside the diner, the city moved. Inside, the tea arrived, and the coffee arrived, and the server set them down without comment and disappeared. And Michael Brooks and Evelyn Carter sat at a small table in the same diner, where a year ago everything had broken open, and they were entirely present, and entirely themselves, and entirely there together. Lily texted Michael at 8:45. Evelyn saw him glance at his phone and then look up with the specific expression of a father receiving a message from a teenager who knew exactly what she was doing. He showed Evelyn the screen. It said, "Don't be home before 10. I'm watching a documentary about the Clean Water Act, and I need the TV for at least another hour. Also tell Evelyn she left her scarf here last week. It's on the hook by the door." Evelyn read it. She looked at Michael. "She orchestrated this," Evelyn said. "She absolutely orchestrated this," Michael said. "She gave us 2 hours." "She gave us 2 hours," he said. "She's 14, Evelyn said. "I know," he said. "I'm slightly terrified of what she'll accomplish by 30. Evelyn thought about a teenager who looked up ex-fiancés in the interest of protective due diligence, who won debates about the Dust Bowl, who told a billionaire CEO you're supposed to be here with the casual certainty of someone stating an obvious fact. "She's going to change things," Evelyn said. "Whatever she decides to do, she's going to change things." "Yeah," Michael said, and his voice had that quality again, the particular astonishment of a parent who kept being surprised by the person their child was becoming. "She already is." They stayed until 9:45. They talked the way they always talked, in fragments and full thoughts, and the silences between them that had never needed filling. She told him about a new research initiative she was planning. He told her that the man whose Camaro he had restored had come to pick it up and had stood in the shop for a full 5 minutes, just looking at it, not touching it, just looking, and then had turned to Michael with an expression that Michael could not describe, except to say it looked like someone recognizing something they thought was gone. "You gave him that," Evelyn said. "The car was always there," Michael said. "I just found what was wrong." She looked at him across the table. "Is that what you think happened with us?" she said. "You just found what was wrong." He considered. "No," he said. "I think what was wrong found its way out on its own. I just made room." She absorbed that. She thought about a rainy night and an empty chair and a man who had simply moved his jacket. Made room. That was the whole thing, she thought. That was the entire architecture of what Michael Brooks had done for her. Not a grand gesture, not a rescue, not a plan. Just a consistent, quiet, completely genuine making of room. For her to sit. For her to speak. For her to be angry and uncertain and afraid and choosing all at once. For her to arrive at her own answers on her own timeline without anyone pushing the conclusion. He had made room, and she had grown into it. She walked out of the diner with her hand in his and the cold January air against her face, and she did not feel like a woman who had survived a difficult year. She did not feel like a CEO who had defeated a calculated enemy, or a patient who had outlasted a dangerous diagnosis, or a daughter who had honored a father's instruction to do something that took everything she had. She felt like Evelyn. Just Evelyn. The woman who had asked, "Can I sit here?" and had been given a yes that changed everything. They walked to his car. He drove her to her building, and she kissed him goodbye at the curb, the way people kissed goodbye when the goodbye was not permanent and the next hello was already a fact. She went inside. She sat at her desk for an hour and looked at the letter from Anne Calloway, which she had brought home and placed on her desk because it belonged somewhere she could see it. The world being kinder than it usually manages to be. She had built a company on the belief that some gaps were worth closing, that some conditions were worth fighting, that the difference between surviving and living was worth every resource she had. She had believed all of that. She had not believed until a rainy night and an empty chair, and a man who moved his jacket, that the same principle applied to herself. That she was a gap worth closing, that she was worth the resources, that surviving and living were two different things, and that she had only been doing one of them. She believed it now. She picked up her phone and sent one message to Michael. It said only, "Thank you for moving your jacket." His response came 40 seconds later. "Thank you for asking." She put her phone down and looked at the city through her window, and felt the full, clear, unambiguous weight of a life that had finally stopped being managed from a distance and had become at last entirely real. The billionaire CEO who had built an empire on the refusal to accept limits had spent 15 years proving she was unstoppable. It turned out the thing she could not stop was not a diagnosis, not an enemy, not a board, not a market, not a man who had tried to dismantle her from the inside. The thing she could not stop was this: the ordinary, extraordinary, completely sufficient truth that a stranger's kindness given without expectation and received without design had found its way home. And the woman who had once walked into a rainy diner asking only for a chair had finally completely, and without reservation, found her way home too.